Music pounded as laughter split the rooftop, and my name rode the echo like a dare. Liam said, "She cried in my car for an hour about her dad." The circle gasped. My glass stalled midair. Heat climbed my neck. I tasted copper fear. Maya said, "Ava, breathe." I stared at Liam's easy grin, as if it were a mask slipping. Noah glanced away, guilty constellations in his eyes. I said, "You promised forever." Liam said, "Relax, it was just a story." The word story sliced deeper than any blade. The city hummed under us like a lie we both rehearsed. My secret stood on the table, barefoot and shaking. He had cupped it once like a candle, swearing to shield the flame. Now he held it to the wind. I said, "You used my pain for applause." Someone laughed too loudly and then hushed, and the silence after was heavier than the beat. Liam said, "They were going to find out anyway." Maya's hand found my wrist and steadied it. Noah said, "This isn't right." The skyline blinked, cool and indifferent. Trust cracked like ice in a drink that had already gone warm. The music thinned as I stepped closer, and the circle opened like a wound pretending to heal. I said, "You swore this was ours." Liam said, "I was helping you own it." The word helping rang false, sharp as broken ice. Maya hovered, ready to catch shrapnel. Noah stood between shadows, and his silence felt like a verdict I didn't want. I said, "You turned confession into content." He rolled his shoulders, easy as a street trick he'd practiced for years. Liam said, "People care about you more when they know the drama." A laugh barked from someone and died. Wind lifted napkins and spun them like white flags too late to matter. I heard my father's name tossed on the concrete air, and it stung. I said, "You promised forever, not followers." Liam said, "Don't be so dramatic." The rooftop light flickered, and every blink rewrote who we were. Maya said, "Ava, let's step away." I felt the city tilt, and I wondered if gravity was done being kind. The night had teeth, and he had given it my pulse. We moved toward the stairwell where the bass softened, and the city breathed between railings. Liam said, "You wanted honesty." I said, "I wanted you." The word "you" felt heavier than the building. He leaned against cold metal like it owed him comfort. Maya stayed near the door, hinge quiet, eyes loud. "Noah," said Liam, "stop." Liam said, "She's stronger than she thinks." I remembered the night I folded into his shoulder, and he swore he was a vault. I said, "A vault doesn't sell tickets." He laughed, thin and brittle. Distant sirens wrote red lines across the skyline. My phone buzzed with messages that weren't kind. Someone downstairs replayed his words, and they multiplied. I said, "You used my name as a microphone." Liam said, "Truth doesn't need permission." The stairwell swallowed the sentence, and it echoed back as something meaner. Maya said, "Ava, you don't owe him this." I felt the metal under my palm, and it was colder than I remembered we could be. Rain began like static, soft first, then certain, washing the heat from the roof as we spilled outside. I said, "Was I just material?" Liam said, "You're missing the point." The point felt like a needle finding every bruise. Maya lifted her collar and searched my face for somewhere safe. Noah said, "Apologize." Liam rolled his eyes, and the streetlights crowned him with wet gold he didn't deserve. I said, "You turned grief into currency." He said, "It's real if people hear it." The word "real" rattled my ribs. Car tires hissed, a siren smudged the block red. Raindrops stippled my jacket, and the cold steadied me. I remembered our first promise on a summer sidewalk, and the echo of forever hurt. Maya said, "Ava, choose yourself." I said, "I am." Liam said, "You'll thank me when this blows over." The rain disagreed and wrote a firm line under our names. The night moved on, but I didn't follow it the same. We stood under the awning while thunder stitched the sky and the city counted to itself. I said, "You don't get to narrate me." Liam said everyone already knows. A bus roared past and erased his voice for one mercy second. I'm going to learn. Maya handed me a napkin, and it tore in neat halves. Noah said, Ava, let's go. I watched the halves curl in my palm like the last 2 years had done. I said, I told you to keep me safe. He met my stare and blinked first. Liam said fine, I went too far. The apology was thin enough to see daylight through. I said, you went somewhere I can't follow. The awning dripped in tidy beats, and each drop marked a door closing. Maya said, we leave now. Noah opened the umbrella, and it felt like a small rebellion against a storm that had already decided. I stepped into the rain and let it claim what he had tried to rename. The street tasted cleaner than his sorry did. Rain ticked against my window like second thoughts as I opened the shoebox we once called our archive. Liam said, every best moment deserves a witness, and I believed he meant me. Ticket stubs smelled like old sugar. A Polaroid flashed us laughing under sparklers, and I remembered how he steadied my bike after a bad turn and said, you fall, I'm the ground. I said, then be soft. He grinned and swore, always. The word always lived in my chest like a small lantern. Maya called those years a nest, and she wasn't wrong. Noah said, you two are ridiculous, but he smiled when he said it. I traced a doodle heart he left on a coffee sleeve, and felt the paper pulse. I said, we were a language. Back then he captioned us with promises and not with punchlines. I let the Polaroid lean against the glass, and imagined the wind holding it upright. I said, I remember why it mattered. The room warmed with ghosts that still knew my name, and refused to leave. Dawn bruised the river with violet and gold, and I walked the pier we once called our oath. Liam said, if the world tips we lean back to back, and we press shoulders until our spines agreed. I said, no secrets that could drown us. He lifted 2 braided cords from his pocket, and tied one to my wrist. He said, this is our anchor. The word anchor matched the water's slow breath. Gulls wrote messy signatures over the light, and I laughed because he tried to sign his bigger. Maya said, you look unsinkable when I sent a photo. Noah replied with a ship emoji and a thumbs up. I said, we picked forever and stamped it like a pier ticket. He said, we're the tide and the shore. I believe the tide was kind. Now the cord lies in my palm, frayed at the knot that used to feel like a promise. The wind moved through the slats and hummed a song we once knew by heart. At the corner coffee shop, steam curled like handwriting, and the barista still knew our order by heart. Liam said, work from here and I'll edit your pitch, and he drew arrows on my notebook like paths out of fog. I said, you make the hard parts breathable. Maya said, boundaries and snacks, and slid a granola bar across the table. Noah said, you're both doing too much, then refilled our water like a referee. We shared headphones and let one song play on loop until the melody felt like scaffolding. I said, we're building something that won't fall. He said, we're better than sturdy. The afternoon softened, and deadlines obeyed us for once. A napkin sketch of our dream board lived in my bag for months. I kept it folded near my ID because it felt like proof. I said, this table was our small city. The espresso machine sighed, and the room agreed that we had earned the quiet. The hospital waiting room once smelled like lemon and fear, and he made a joke about both. Liam said, I'm not leaving, and draped his jacket over my shoulders when the vents got mean. I said, this part stays between us, and the fluorescent lights steadied as if they had heard. He nodded, solemn, and pressed his palm to mine. He said, your family is my family. A vending machine hummed like a lullaby with nothing soft in it. Maya texted a prayer, and Noah sent a photo of the sunrise he promised was ours. I said, hold the hours still, and he sat on the cold floor to keep time from tipping. We counted breaths and bad news until the nurse brought a sliver of okay. I said, thank you for guarding the door. He said, Doors are easy when I know who I'm keeping safe. The jacket was heavy, and the weight felt like mercy that had found a home. On a spring road, the world unspooled like ribbon, and our playlist stitched the miles. Liam said, "Forever is light work if you keep laughing," and drummed the dash to a song that knew our names. I said, "Promise me we'll still be here when the chorus ends." He tapped his heart twice and grinned. We pulled into a gas station that smelled like sun and oranges. I wrote "Hold tight" on a receipt and tucked it in his visor. He said, "You're the best part of my sentences." The map app rerouted, and we cheered like we had earned a secret path. Maya sent a photo of flowers and told us to drink water. Noah called and yelled, "Don't speed," over our crosstalk. I said, "Our little world keeps choosing us." He said, "Because we keep choosing back." The wind braided our voices into something bigger than air. I remember every turn, and none of it feels imaginary. By Monday, the group chat felt like a room with one chair missing and everyone pretending not to notice. Liam said, "Swamped," and left my last 3 messages on read. I said, "Call me when you land," and watched the dots vanish like a trick. Maya said, "He is dodging." Noah said, "Give him a day." A photo surfaced from a rooftop I did not know, and he was there, easy grin restored. I said, "You told me you were home." He replied with a shrug emoji that felt like a slap. The week thinned into errands that could not carry me. I sorted receipts and found the old bracelet thread, now loose like a warning. Maya said, "Distance can lie." I said, "We always told the truth." The word always scraped. Noah said, "Talk in person." I said, "He keeps choosing rooms without me." The city outside rattled the window, and I wondered if the glass or I would break first. At a gallery opening, the room glittered with borrowed confidence and thin wine. Liam said, "Come through," and then drifted like a rumor with legs. I said, 2 minutes, but he granted 1. He laughed at a story, and I heard my cadence wearing his mouth. Maya said, "He is practicing you." Noah said, "He is working this crowd." I said, "We never used each other as mirrors." Liam said, "I'll call," and the promise broke as he finished it. A woman asked about a secret that was not hers to hold. I said, "Who told you that?" And she smiled like the sun had chosen her. Liam said, "Relax. It is just context." The word context felt like a hole in the floor. I stood on the edge and counted how often he forgot to look back. Maya said, "Your face is telling on him." I steadied my breath and saved the heat for later. At midnight, the kitchen hummed like a fridge holding its breath, and my phone lit with a teaser clip. A host said, "When a friend's secret becomes brand," and I knew the phrasing was ours. I said, "No one else calls it that." Liam texted, "Anonymous story, calm down." Calm felt like a dress 2 sizes too small. Maya said, "He fed it." Noah said, "Ask for the raw audio." I said, "He will deny edits." The kettle clicked off, and the silence slapped harder than steam. I replayed the line until it shed the skin of doubt. Liam said, "You are making enemies out of echoes." I said, "You licensed my lungs." The night tilted, and the tiles under my feet remembered the hospital hour. I had asked him to guard the door, now he was selling the key. Maya said, "Tomorrow, we draw a line." I nodded at no one and finally felt the shape of the cut. We planned to meet at the clinic where I handle forms that still shake my hand. Liam said, "I will be there," and the bench beside me learned his name by waiting. I said 5 more minutes to the clock and it refused. Maya said, "You owe him nothing." Noah said, "If he misses this, it is a choice." A push notification arrived from an event he never mentioned, and his wristband shone in a stranger's store. I said, "You forgot where I bleed." He messaged, "Got pulled into a panel." The word pulled pretended he had no hands. I signed alone and felt the pen judge us. The automatic doors sighed like exhausted parents. He sent a selfie with a microphone that had never heard my side. I said, You keep choosing rooms where applause drowns me. The corridor held my echo and did not apologize. That night, at a low-lit lounge, gossip drifted like incense, sweet and choking. Maya said, "He is here," and pointed to a corner where Liam bent close to a host with an eager smile. I said, "Do not jump," and still my heart ran. Noah said, "We listen first." Liam said, "She cried in a way that could teach a class," and laughter pricked the dark. I said, "He is doing it again." Maya's stare sharpened into a blade that refused to leave the sheath. Noah said, "He knows we can hear." Liam said, "It is all love," and the word love sagged under the weight. I stepped forward and stopped, tasting the cost of a public scene. I said, "This is where our map tears." Maya said, "Then fold it before it rips you." The bass climbed the walls and made the ceiling shiver. The night took notes while I learned how to unclasp a door inside my chest. The text hit like a flare in a dark field. Screenshots of Liam's chat where my secrets were traded like currency. Maya said, "You need to see this," and my pulse stuttered. Noah said, "Confirm before you burn bridges." I scrolled and saw my grief parceled into punchlines, my hospital nights turned into anecdotes with emojis. I said, "He stripped the skin from my memories." Liam replied, "It was just banter." The word banter was a coffin lid, nailed down tight. Maya said, "That is not banter, it is betrayal." I remembered his hand on mine when I could not sign the form, and bile rose at how easily he sold that tenderness. Noah said, "Confront him tonight. No delay." I said, "He weaponized my voice." The phone felt heavier than glass, and I wanted to throw it through every promise we had built. The truth no longer hid, it screamed in digital ink. We met in the diner where the vinyl seats cracked with age, and the jukebox hummed old promises. Liam said, "You overreacted, sliding into the booth like it belonged to him." I said, "You auctioned my scars." His eyes flickered toward the waitress, using her as shield. Maya sat across, arms folded, fury measured. Noah said, "Say the truth." Liam sighed, stirring sugar he did not need. He said, "It was entertainment." I said, "It was my father's ghost." Silence held the booth until the coffee steamed between us. Maya said, "You cannot fix this with jokes." Liam leaned back and forced a smile. I said, "The mask is tired, let it fall." He said, "If people laugh, no one feels pain." I said, "Except me." The jukebox clicked to a song we once claimed as ours, and it felt like Betrayal had taken the chorus for itself. By the riverbank where we once swore loyalty, the air cut sharp, carrying echoes of old vows. Liam said, "You keep making me the villain." I said, "You cast yourself when you shared my blood as gossip." His breath clouded, harsh against the night. Maya said, "He cannot rewrite this." Noah said, "You chose applause over friendship." Liam said, "I needed to be seen." The word seen bent the air around us. I said, "I gave you my silence as sanctuary, and you turned it into spectacle." He kicked gravel and looked away. I said, "You are not my anchor, you are the storm." Maya touched my arm as if to remind me the ground was still there. Noah said, "End it clean." Liam muttered, "You will miss me." The river replied with a chill that promised otherwise. The silent witness stepped out from shadow, a college friend who had heard too much. Jordan said, "He has been telling your stories for months." His eyes carried pity and shame. I said, "Months?" Liam said, "You don't know context." Jordan said, "I heard him call it content." The word content cracked the last plank of the bridge. Maya said, "There is your truth." Noah clenched his jaw, fury simmering. I said, "You rehearsed my pain like a script." Liam said, "Everyone embellishes." Jordan shook his head and whispered, "Not like this." I felt my stomach twist as memory after memory grew fangs. I said, "You didn't slip, you strategized." Liam said, "It kept me relevant." The night exhaled cold air, and Jordan's silence carried the final verdict. No excuse could survive. At the bridge where we once carved our initials, the truth landed without mercy. Liam said, "I never promised perfection." I said, "You promised forever." The word forever was heavy as the steel under us. Maya said, "Forever does not include betrayal." Noah said, "You cannot unring a bell." Liam said, "You act like I murdered something." I said, "You did." The river below roared approval. Maya's breath fogged, white against black. Noah said, "This is done." Liam tried to smirk, but the mask sagged under rain that had begun again. I said, "You didn't just betray me, you betrayed every version of us we could have been." His silence answered louder than denial. The bridge lights flickered, and I walked away, leaving the echo behind to haunt him. The bar's back room felt like a storm cell, walls heavy with bass and sweat. Liam said, "We need to clear the air," but his smirk carried no weight. I said, "Air doesn't clear if you keep choking it." Maya leaned near, whispering, "This is it." Noah stood like a god, arms crossed, silence sharper than any blade. Liam said, "You've turned everyone against me." I said, "You did that yourself." His laugh snapped brittle as glass. The crowd nearby shifted, sensing thunder in our corner. Maya said, "Stop twisting." Noah said, "Tell her the truth." Liam slammed his palm on the table, rattling the glasses. I said, "You promised sanctuary and gave me spectacle." He said, "You wanted to matter." I said, "Not like this." The music dropped, and for 1 second the world listened. Rage became oxygen. The argument cracked wider than the walls could contain. Liam said, "You owe me your story." I gave it reach. I said, "You stole my breath and sold it cheap." His eyes glimmered like a blade hunting light. Maya said, "Ava, don't give him more." Noah said, "Look at him. He's cornered, not sorry." Liam's voice rose, slicing through the beat. He said, "Without me, you were just noise." I said, "Without you, I'm finally free." Silence grabbed the room by the throat. A glass fell and shattered, punctuating the truth. Liam tried to laugh, but the sound drowned in its own weight. Maya said, "You're done." Noah's hand brushed my shoulder, steady as a lighthouse. I said, "You don't own me anymore." The ceiling dripped with condensation, as though even the air sweated under the collapse. Rain chased us into the alley, thunder hammering above, the city echoing our war. Liam shouted, "You're nothing without me." I said, "Then why are you begging my shadow to stay?" Maya said, "He is unraveling." Noah said, "Walk away, Ava." Liam stepped closer, rain streaking his face like proof he could still bleed. I said, "You betrayed every version of us." He said, "You'll regret leaving me." The words hissed like steam off asphalt. Maya pressed at my back, urging forward. Noah blocked Liam's path with shoulders like steel. The storm lit the alley in blue, thunder stitching the silence into something jagged. I said, "Forever died on your tongue." He faltered, lips parting, searching for a weapon that wasn't left. The rain carried the last word, louder than him. Inside the warehouse venue, music throbbed like a second heartbeat, and yet our voices cut louder. Liam said, "You'll crawl back." I said, "I won't crawl anywhere ever again." Maya's jaw clenched tight enough to shake her glasses. Noah said, "She doesn't belong to your stage." Liam laughed, brittle, and pulled his phone, waving the screen like a sword. I said, "Try it. You'll only prove me right." His hand shook, though he tried to steady it. The crowd noticed, whispers multiplying. Maya said, "He's exposed now." Liam said, "I made her." I said, "You unmade yourself." His smirk collapsed into silence, and the lights above flickered as if deciding sides. The music surged, swallowing the moment whole, but I knew the verdict had landed. The climax broke at the rooftop where it began, circle incomplete, trust ash on the wind. Liam said, "You'll remember me when it's quiet." I said, "Quiet is the gift you never gave me." Maya stood steady, lightning crowning her patience. Noah said, "This is your last word, Liam, make it count." Liam's eyes darted, searching for a script that no longer existed. He said, "I loved you like family." I said, "You loved me like fuel." Silence bloomed, vast and undeniable. The city lights blinked, indifferent to the fracture. Maya said, "We're done here." Noah guided me toward the stairs. Liam said nothing, his shadow shrinking under neon. I said, "Forever doesn't survive betrayal." The rooftop swallowed the last of his laughter, and the storm took care of the rest. The morning after tasted like ash and coffee, gone cold. I sat on the fire escape, the city already rushing forward without me. Maya said, "You don't have to stitch it all today." Noah said, "Scars don't ask permission, they just arrive." I said, "He built a grave for our friendship, and I keep checking if flowers grow there." The air smelled like rust and dawn. Liam's silence stretched long, but it was louder than any confession. I turned my bracelet in my fingers, threads unraveling like promises unkept. Maya said, "Let it fall apart. It was never holding you." I said, "But it held the version of me who believed." Noah said, "Now you get to believe in yourself." The sun climbed, golden and indifferent, and I realized it never stopped shining for me, even when he tried to eclipse it. At the bookstore we once haunted, shelves towered like silent witnesses. I ran my finger across spines we used to argue over. I said, "He loved this one because it lied beautifully." Maya said, "You don't owe him the memory." I slipped a novel back into place and felt lighter. Noah said, "Stories don't die because he used them wrong." I said, "But they change shape." The clerk smiled faintly, unaware of the battlefield I walked through. Liam's ghost lingered in every aisle, but it no longer had teeth. I said, "This is where we dreamed loudest." Maya said, "Then dream again, louder than him." I bought nothing but carried everything, my voice, my breath, my right to begin. I stood on the basketball court where we once promised forever, faded paint lines curling under my shoes. Liam said once, "This is our cathedral." Now it felt like ruins. Noah dribbled twice, offering the ball. He said, "Play anyway." I laughed, brittle at first, then real. The echoes bounced free, unchained from him. Maya clapped, slow, steady. I said, "He can't own this sound." Noah said, "Exactly." For the first time the court belonged only to us, no shadow, no mask, no betrayal. I said, "This was never his cathedral. It was mine." The word mine felt like a sunrise I hadn't known I was waiting for. The cafe window reflected me alone, and I did not flinch. I said, "This face survived." Maya said, "It did more than that." I ordered tea instead of coffee, a small rebellion. Noah said, "You choose what fuels you now." Outside, couples hurried, umbrellas flashing, the city already forgetting last night's storm. I said, "He doesn't own the memory anymore." Maya said, "He never did. You just let him borrow it." I smiled, honest this time. The barista wrote my name on the cup, and it looked cleaner without his shadow. I said, "I am not what he made me." The steam curled like a signature. Mine alone. On the bridge again, I leaned against the railing, the skyline sharp and new. Liam said once, "We are tied and sure." Now I whispered, "I am both alone." The water did not argue. Maya said, "You don't need him to hold weight." Noah said, "You carry yourself." I said, "He stole my forever, but not my tomorrow." The words floated steady over the roar below. Liam's absence felt less like a wound, and more like a scar learning to fade. I let the bracelet drop into the river, threads swallowed whole. Maya said, "That's release." I said, "That's survival." The skyline blinked like a pulse, steady mine. The apartment felt cleaner without his name clinging to the air. I boxed up the last of his letters, each folded promise now just paper. Maya said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I need the weight gone." Noah carried the box to the curb, rain misting like a baptism. I whispered, "Forever doesn't belong here anymore." The air tasted lighter, like a door had been unlatched. Maya said, "This is the start, not the end." I said, "Both can live in the same room." The trash truck groaned, swallowing our past without ceremony. My chest hurt, but it was the kind of pain that meant space was clearing. I looked at the empty shelf and said, "This is where I begin again." At the park bench where we once carved initials, I traced the grooves worn by weather, initials now blurred by time. I said, "Even stone doesn't keep forever." Maya said, "It wasn't meant to." Noah said, "The story is yours, not his." I leaned back, listening to the wind write new verses in the trees. Children laughed in the distance, a sound untainted by betrayal. I said, "He thought he was the author, but I hold the pen." The bench creaked like it agreed. Maya smiled softly, her silence louder than words. The world moved, and for the first time I did not feel left behind. The silent witness, Jordan, called once more. He said, "He's still spinning stories, but people aren't laughing anymore." I said, "Let them see the wreck for themselves." Jordan said, "You came out stronger." I said, "I came out scarred, but scars shine in their own way." Maya said, "That's survival speaking." Noah said, "That's victory." I closed my eyes and listened, not to Liam's ghost, but to the quiet rhythm of my breath. For the first time in months, it sounded like music written only for me. That night I wrote my name in chalk on the sidewalk, small but certain. Maya said, "Why?" I said, "Because it's mine." Rain threatened, but I let it. Noah laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. I said, "He wanted my name to be his story, but I give it back to myself." Chalk dust clung to my fingers, fragile and defiant. Maya said, "Tomorrow, it will wash away." I said, "That's the point. I can write it again." The city breathed around us, unbothered, alive. On the rooftop one last time I faced the skyline, wind tugging at my hair. I whispered, "He promised forever, but forever isn't his to give." The city answered with silence, stronger than applause. Maya stood behind me, a steady anchor. Noah said, "You're free." I said, "He didn't just betray me. He betrayed every version of us we could have been." The words cut clean, final. The skyline pulsed steady, a heartbeat not his. I turned from the edge, leaving the night to swallow his ghost while mine walked forward with me.